My name is Caroline. I'm 38, and for 11 years I worked as a marketing director for a regional healthcare network in Raleigh. I managed budgets, campaigns, and vendor contracts. I was organized in the way that people are organized when disorganization has actual consequences. I kept records of everything: meeting notes, decision logs, correspondence trails. I built the habit young and never lost it, because I had learned early that the person who can prove what happened is the person who gets to tell the story. 2 years ago, I left that job to move into my grandmother's house and care for her full-time. No salary, no contract, no timeline. Just me, her spare bedroom, and the understanding between us that had been built over 35 years of Sunday phone calls and holiday visits, and the particular closeness that sometimes skips a generation and lands between a grandmother and a granddaughter like a gift neither of them fully expected. Eleanor died 14 months later at 84. She left behind a house, an investment account, and a will that had been in place for 6 years, naming me as the primary beneficiary of her estate. She also left behind a trust document that had been signed 6 months before her death, prepared by my Aunt Patricia's attorney, transferring everything into a trust Patricia controlled. A document signed when Eleanor's medical records, which I had kept in a binder on the kitchen shelf because I kept records of everything, showed she was on day 4 of a urinary tract infection that had sent her blood pressure spiking and her orientation sliding and had required an emergency telehealth call at 2 in the morning. Patricia thought 2 years of caregiving logs were just a daughter's devotion. She hadn't counted on the fact that I had dated and timestamped every single one. She hadn't counted on what a woman who built her career on documentation does when she finds a legal document she believes was obtained improperly. She calls an attorney. Before the funeral, flowers are placed on the grave. Welcome to the family ledger, where we talk honestly about money, family, and the cost of the things people do when they think nobody's watching. If you've ever sacrificed something real for someone you loved and watched someone else try to take the credit, this story is for you. Subscribe, drop a comment, and let me take you back to the beginning. I want to tell you about Eleanor first, because this story is about money and law and documentation. But underneath all of that, it is about a woman who deserved better than what her daughter did to her estate. And I want you to know who she was before I tell you what happened to what she left behind. Eleanor May Whitfield was 5 feet 1 inch, kept her hair silver and short, and had opinions about everything from soil acidity in her tomato beds to the structural failings of modern political discourse. She'd been a bookkeeper for 30 years at a lumber company in Sanford, North Carolina, and she brought a bookkeeper's precision to every corner of her life. Her kitchen cabinets were labeled. Her filing system made sense. Her checkbook had never been out of balance in 40 years of independent living. She had been widowed at 62 when my grandfather Harold passed from a cardiac event that gave no warning. She handled that loss the way she handled everything. Quietly, completely, and without asking anyone to carry it for her. She stayed in their house on Birchwood Lane. She kept the garden. She drove herself to appointments until she was 81 and only stopped when her ophthalmologist said the night vision made it inadvisable. She called me every Sunday at 8 in the morning because she said Sunday mornings were when she did her best thinking and she liked to share it with someone who would understand it. I was 15 when those calls started. I was 36 when they became the thing I planned my week around. My grandmother had one daughter, my mother Susan, and one thing I need to be honest about is that their relationship was complicated in the way that some mother-daughter relationships are complicated when the mother is precise and self-sufficient, and the daughter is neither. My mother loved Eleanor. She also found her exhausting and intimidating and had spent most of her adult life at a comfortable distance from both of those feelings. My Aunt Patricia is my mother's older sister. She is 64, lives in Charlotte, and has the particular confidence of someone who has always believed that family decisions should be made by whoever makes them first. She had a closer relationship with Eleanor in the surface sense. She visited more regularly than my mother did. She called on weekdays as well as weekends. She remembered birthdays and brought casseroles and sat at Eleanor's kitchen table with the studied warmth of someone who understood that presence is a form of investment. I had understood that about Patricia for years. I had simply believed that Eleanor understood it too. Eleanor's health began declining seriously when she was 82. Not dramatically, not all at once. The slow accumulation of things. Arthritis made the stairs difficult. Blood pressure that requires monitoring. A fall in the bathroom in October that didn't break anything but frightened everyone enough that the conversation about her living situation became unavoidable. Patricia's solution was a memory care facility 40 minutes from Charlotte. She had researched options, she said, and this one was highly rated, had availability, and Eleanor would be well looked after. Eleanor's solution was me. She called me on a Sunday, which was when she did her best thinking, and she asked me directly. She said she did not want to leave her house. She said she was not ready for a facility, and she hoped she never would be. She said she knew it was a significant ask, and she would understand if I said no. Then she said, if you did this for me, I would make it right for you. I have made arrangements. You would be taken care of. I want to be clear that the arrangements were not why I said yes. I said yes because she was my grandmother, and she had called me every Sunday for 21 years. And I loved her in the specific way you love someone who has always seen you clearly and been glad about what they saw. I gave notice at my job. I negotiated a freelance consulting arrangement with a former colleague that covered my basic expenses. I packed what I needed. I moved into the spare bedroom on Birchwood Lane in September, 2 years before Eleanor died, and I began the work of being there. Caregiving is invisible in the way that most essential labor is invisible. Nobody sees the 2 in the morning blood pressure check. Nobody sees the medication log, the appointment calendar, the weekly calls to the specialist, the careful note about which foods were causing the digestive issues and which weren't. Nobody sees the hours spent helping someone bathe with dignity intact or the conversation that has to happen when a person you love asks you to be honest about what the doctor actually said. I saw all of it. I did all of it. And I documented all of it, not because I was strategic. Because I was organized, because I had built a career on documentation, and because Eleanor herself kept records and had taught me that careful people write things down. Every medication given, the time and dosage, was logged in a spiral notebook I kept on the kitchen shelf. Every medical appointment, the date, provider, and what was discussed is logged in a separate folder. Every significant health event, the symptoms, timeline, and outcome are logged with the same precision. Every visit from family members, brief and infrequent, was noted in the margins. Patricia visited once a month. She brought casseroles and sat with Eleanor for 2 to 3 hours and left. She sent texts occasionally asking how things were going. She called Eleanor directly on weekdays, which Eleanor enjoyed. On 2 occasions, she brought her attorney with her, a man named Gerald who carried a briefcase and smiled in a practiced way, and whom Eleanor described afterward as a very thorough young man. I noted both visits in the margin of the log. Attorney present. Gerald Marsh. 2 hours. I did not know then what those visits were for. I filed the information the way I filed everything. Completely and without knowing yet which details would matter. Eleanor had 3 significant health episodes in the 14 months I cared for her. A respiratory infection in February that required hospitalization for 4 days. A fall in the kitchen in July that bruised her hip but broke nothing. And in November, 6 months before she died, a urinary tract infection arrived fast and hit hard. UTIs in elderly patients are not simply infections. They cause what clinicians call acute altered mental status. Confusion, disorientation, agitation, and dramatic shifts in cognitive function can make a person seem like someone entirely different from who they are. Eleanor, who was precise and oriented and sharp in her better periods, became during that UTI episode someone who could not consistently remember what day it was, who confused me with my mother twice in an afternoon, and who woke at 2 in the morning, convinced that Harold, dead for 22 years, was late coming home from work. I logged all of it. Day 1 through day 7, every symptom, every confusion, every moment of clarity, and every moment of disorientation. I logged the telehealth call at 2:14 in the morning on day 4 when her blood pressure had spiked. And I needed medical guidance. I logged the antibiotic dosages. I logged the gradual return to clarity over the following week. On day 4 of that episode, while Eleanor's blood pressure was elevated and her orientation was inconsistent, and she had confused me with my mother twice that morning, Gerald Marsh came to the house. I was not home. I had run to the pharmacy for the antibiotic refill and asked our neighbor Helen, a retired nurse who lived 2 doors down, to sit with Eleanor for the hour I'd be gone. Helen was there when Gerald arrived. She let him in because Eleanor seemed to know him and seemed glad to see him. Helen told me about it when I came back. A man came with papers. Said Eleanor signed something. Eleanor seemed confused, but Gerald said it was fine, and the signing was witnessed by his assistant, who had waited in the car. I wrote that in the log. November 14th. Gerald Marsh visited on the 4th day 4 of antibiotics. Document signed. Eleanor was disoriented, per Helen's account. I did not know what the documents were. I filed the information the way I filed everything. And I kept caring for my grandmother for 6 more months until she died on a Tuesday in May with my hand in hers and the Sunday morning light coming through the bedroom window. The estate attorney's office scheduled the reading 3 weeks after the funeral. I drove to Sanford in the same clothes I had worn to the service because I hadn't yet found the energy to think carefully about what I was wearing. The reading was in a small conference room. My mother was there. Patricia was there with her 2 adult children, my cousins Renee and David. Eleanor's attorney, a woman named Barbara, who had prepared the original will 6 years earlier, sat at the head of the table. She opened with the will. 6 years old, properly executed, naming me as the primary beneficiary of Eleanor's estate, including the house on Birchwood Lane, the investment account, and all personal property. Bequest to Susan and Patricia of $10,000 each. The remainder is for me. Patricia's expression during the reading of the will was the expression of someone listening to something they have already arranged to make irrelevant. Barbara paused. She said there was a subsequent document. A revocable living trust, she said, executed 6 months prior, which superseded the will with respect to the assets transferred into it. The trust named Patricia Holloway as sole trustee and her children, Renee and David, as beneficiaries. The house. The investment account. Everything. I looked at the table. I felt the thing in my chest that arrives when numbers stop adding up before you can name exactly why. I looked at Patricia. She was looking at Barbara with the composed attention of someone waiting for a confirmation she already expected. I said, "What was the date of execution on the trust?" Barbara checked her records. November 14th. I looked at the table again. November 14th, day 4 of the UTI. The day Gerald came while I was at the pharmacy. The day Eleanor had confused me with my mother twice before noon. The day Helen said she seemed confused, but Gerald said it was fine. I kept my voice level. I said, "I need a copy of the trust document." Barbara said she could provide one. I said, "Thank you." I picked up my bag. I said I would be in touch. I drove home on autopilot. I walked into the house on Birchwood Lane that still smelled like Eleanor's hand cream and the lavender soap she kept by the kitchen sink. I went to the kitchen shelf. I picked up the spiral notebook, the appointment folder, and the log binder. I sat at the kitchen table, and I opened to November 14th. I read every word I had written. I read it twice. Then I called my attorney. If you've ever done the right thing for the right reason and watched someone try to erase it, leave a comment. Tell me what that moment felt like. And if you haven't subscribed to the Family Ledger yet, do it now. Because what I carried into that attorney's office changed every assumption Patricia had built her plan around. My attorney is a woman named Diane who handles estate and probate litigation, and whom I had found through a referral from a colleague the week after the reading. I sent her everything before our first call. The original will, the trust document, the caregiving logs, the medical records, the November 14th entry with Helen's account, the telehealth record from 2:14 in the morning on day 4. She called me after reviewing the documents and said 3 sentences that I wrote down on my legal pad. The trust was executed on a day with documented evidence of an acute, altered mental status. The signing was witnessed by the attorney's own assistant rather than independent witnesses. And the grantor's primary caregiver, whose logs document the cognitive state at the exact time of signing, was removed from the premises during execution. She said, "Caroline, what you have here is a textbook capacity challenge. The question is whether you want to pursue it." I said I did. I said it the way Eleanor would have said it. Quietly, completely, without drama. Diane filed a petition to challenge the trust's validity in probate court because Eleanor lacked testamentary capacity at the time of execution. She attached the caregiving logs as exhibits. She attached the medical records, including the telehealth call timestamp. She submitted a signed statement from Helen describing Eleanor's condition and the circumstances of the signing. Gerald Marsh received the filing through Patricia's legal representation. Patricia called my mother the same day. My mother called me. Her voice on the phone was the voice she used when she was caught between 2 things she couldn't reconcile. She said Patricia was very upset. She said the family was being torn apart. She said, "Couldn't we find another way to handle this?" I said, "Mom, Eleanor signed a legal document on a day when she called me by your name twice before noon and woke up at 2 in the morning, convinced Harold was coming home. I have all of it documented. If that document is valid, the documentation will show it. If it isn't, the court will say so." She was quiet. I said, "I'm not doing this to Patricia. Patricia did this to Eleanor." My mother didn't have an answer for that. She said she needed to think. She hung up. The probate hearing was 8 weeks later. Diane presented the capacity challenge with the methodical precision of someone who had done this before and knew exactly what the court needed to see. The caregiving logs, dated and timestamped, cover 14 months of Eleanor's health. The medical records showed the UTI diagnosis, the blood pressure readings, and the telehealth call at 2:14 in the morning on November 14th. Helen's statement describes Eleanor's disorientation and the circumstances under which Gerald and his assistant obtained the signature. Gerald's defense was that Eleanor had been lucid during the signing, that she had understood the documents, and that the trust represented her genuine intentions as communicated to him over 2 previous visits. Diane asked him to provide notes from those visits documenting Eleanor's expressed wishes. He had none. Diane asked him to explain why the trust had been signed by his own office assistant rather than 2 independent witnesses unrelated to any party with an interest in the document. He said it was standard practice. Diane said it was standard practice when a signing was uncontested. When a signing might be challenged on capacity grounds, independent witnesses were the professional standard. The judge asked to review the medical records for November 14th. She reviewed the telehealth record. She reviewed the blood pressure readings. She reviewed the log entry describing Eleanor calling me by my mother's name twice before noon. She ruled that the evidence presented raised sufficient concern about Eleanor's cognitive capacity on the date of execution to invalidate the trust. She ordered the estate to revert to the terms of the original will. Patricia sat very still when the ruling was read. Her attorney made notes. Her children looked at the table. I looked at my legal pad. I had written one thing on it before the hearing started. Eleanor kept records. So did I. The estate settled 4 months after the hearing. The house on Birchwood Lane came to me. The investment account, $287,000, came to me. The bequests to Susan and Patricia of $10,000 each were honored as the will directed. Patricia did not contest the ruling. Her attorney advised her, I was told through channels, that contesting would extend the proceedings and that the documentation Diane had presented made a successful appeal unlikely. She has not called me since the hearing. My mother relayed this information with the careful neutrality of someone walking a very narrow bridge between two people she loves and does not want to fall off on either side. I told my mother I understood. I also told her that if Patricia ever wanted to talk, I would listen. Not because I expected it. Because Eleanor would have wanted that door left open, and I owed Eleanor at least that. My mother said that was very mature of me. I said it was very Eleanor of me. She laughed a little. That was the most honest moment we'd had in months. I want to tell you about Helen, because she matters more than she knows. Helen came to the hearing voluntarily. She did not have to. She was 71 and had lived 2 doors down from Eleanor for 19 years. And she came because she said someone needed to say out loud what she had seen. She sat in the witness chair in her good blue dress, and she described November 14th clearly and without embellishment. She said Eleanor had seemed confused. She said she had told Gerald this, and Gerald had said Eleanor was just having a tired day. She said she had felt uneasy about it and hadn't known what to do. After the ruling, she found me in the hallway outside the courtroom. She held both my hands in hers and said, "Your grandmother would have wanted this. I know because she told me." I asked her what she meant. Helen said that in October, 6 weeks before the UTI, Eleanor had told her she was worried Patricia's attorney was trying to get her to sign things. She said Eleanor had said she trusted me to sort it out if something went wrong. She said Eleanor had said, "Caroline keeps records. She'll know what to do." I had to stand very still for a moment. I pressed Helen's hands and thanked her, and walked to the end of the hallway where there was a window facing a parking lot. And I stood there for a while. Eleanor had known. She had said my name. She had trusted that what I documented would be enough. It was. I moved into the house on Birchwood Lane in September, the same month I had first moved in to care for her. Different circumstances, same address, same kitchen with the labeled cabinets and the lavender soap, and the window that faces the garden. I am still freelancing. The marketing director role I left does not exist anymore in the form I left it, and I have not decided whether I want to return to that version of my professional life or build something different from where I am. That decision is still in progress. Most real decisions are. What I know is that the house is mine. The garden is mine. The spiral notebooks are on the kitchen shelf where they have always been, labeled by month and year, every entry dated and time-stamped. I started a new one in September. Not a caregiving log. Just a record of things. What happened in the garden. What I made for dinner. What the light looked like on Sunday mornings when I do my best thinking. Eleanor did her best thinking on Sunday mornings too. I learned that from her the same way I learned everything from her. Over time, through attention, by showing up consistently enough that the lessons arrived without anyone calling them lessons. Here's what I know after all of it. When you give 2 years of your life to someone you love, you do not do it for the inheritance. You do it because they asked, and because you love them, and because some things are more important than salary continuity and career trajectory and the version of your life you had planned. But what you build in those 2 years, the logs, the records, the timestamp documentation of every medication and every appointment and every 2 a.m. crisis, that is yours. It is the physical evidence of what you gave. And when someone tries to use the vulnerability of the person you were protecting as the mechanism to take what that person intended for you, your records are the only language the court speaks fluently. Document everything. Not because you expect betrayal. Because you are a careful person and careful people write things down. And sometimes the writing is the only thing that stands between what someone intended and what someone else decided to take. Eleanor kept records for 30 years at a lumber company. She taught me that careful people write things down. She trusted that I would know what to do. She was right about me. She was right about the records. And on the day that mattered most, November 14th at 2:14 in the morning, a timestamped telehealth call told the truth that Gerald's briefcase tried to bury. That's my story. 2 years of caregiving logs, 1 probate hearing, and a neighbor in a blue dress who said out loud what someone needed to say. If it found you at the right moment, share it with someone who is giving everything to care for someone they love and doesn't know yet that the records they're keeping might be the most important thing they've ever written. Drop a comment. Tell me if you've ever sacrificed something real for someone you loved. I read everyone. Subscribe to the Family Ledger.